The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD. It's Friday, the 3rd of April, 2026. We're live here at CHD TV, and I'm very excited to bring on our guests. Good morning to our guests. I'm going to actually have you both introduce yourselves because I don't want to risk getting your last name wrong. Go ahead, Skip, you start.
Sure. I am Major Brennan Schilperoort. I'm a C-130 pilot in the U.S. Active Duty Air Force.
And Davis?
My name is David Younts. I'm a retired Air Force officer and attorney, and I represent military members throughout the world dealing with religious freedom and other military issues.
And both of them are in Duty to Disobey, our movie that's going to be out very shortly in June. But we wanted to get them on because, well, why don't you just talk us through, if you can, Skip, talk us through what happened to you and why you are even sitting where you are right now talking about it. Oh, actually, I think we have to put out a little disclaimer.
Absolutely. My views and opinions are my own. They do not represent the Air Force, the Department of War, or the United States government in any way. Launching into the story, during COVID, right after the mandate came out, I was very concerned. My wife and I were very concerned about the shot, the fact that it was untested, that there were not adequate safety trials. And it didn't matter at that point what the paperwork said of whether or not it was supposedly approved, and it wasn't FDA approved. There's no way you can adequately safety trial something that is rushed to market like that. So initially we had tried for a medical exemption because I'd had a previous pretty severe reaction to, in this case, the flu shot, where I was bedridden for 3 days, sickest I'd ever been in my life. But because this was a brand new product, my medical institution at my base flat out refused to even consider anyone for a medical exemption. So we applied for a religious accommodation based on what we had found at the time, the DNA fragments of aborted fetal tissue in the processing, manufacturing, and now it's been proven via multiple studies that those DNA fragments actually make it into the shot themselves, and those enter your cells and become part of your body. So based on our sincerely held religious belief, we submitted an accommodation request, and that was ultimately denied. In the spring of 22, we joined the Doster versus Kendall lawsuit against the Air Force, and that case narrowly saved me from receiving my first letter of reprimand and getting me discharged. The injunction in summer of 22 saved my career. During the time that we were looking into all the details around the COVID shot, we learned a lot about other shots, including the flu shot. So that fall, we applied for another medical exemption, and the base said, no, we don't entertain them unless you had a severe reaction to like documented recently. So I again applied for a religious accommodation. That whole process, which is supposed to take 120 days, took 10 months. And by this point now, it is September of 2023. The flu shot window for my base had already closed. And when my commander delivered the news that that previous request was denied, he said, "You're not being ordered to take the flu shot. It's past the window that you would need it, and we don't have any available products." Fast forward to November of 2023 now. Again, the topic of the flu shot came up. My commander indicated that he was going to order me to get it. And so we dug in a lot harder this time. I got a antibodies titer test to prove that I had a recent subclinical case of the flu. I think it was actually from my son, but that's peak allergy season here in Arkansas. And so it felt like mild allergy symptoms. And I thought, you know what, let me just go check my antibodies. Sure enough, I had very high antibodies for the flu. I never missed a day of work. And that they completely refused that. When I took it to medical, I actually spoke with my installation's head medical officer, and they told me on the phone, unless you've had an anaphylactic reaction to the flu shot. We're not even going to consider you for a medical exemption. I said, wait, hold on. You're saying you'd rather lose a service member, have me almost die, before you're willing to consider me for an exemption for a product that doesn't work, doesn't stop the flu, doesn't stop hospitalization or transmission of the virus? And they said, yes. So with my options exhausted, I applied for another religious accommodation for the 2023 flu shot, and my boss completely ignored it, violating the Religious Freedom Restoration Act of 1993, the military zone policy, and gave me a letter of reprimand a few weeks later. I filed the entire gamut of inspectors general, military equal opportunity, and congressional complaints, and all of those were summarily ignored and dismissed. Within 7 days of submitting the congressional inquiry, my boss recommended me for discharge in April, actually it was May of 2024. They then sent me to a discharge board. The board voted to discharge me honorably, but for so-called failing to obey a lawful order. But remember, the order wasn't lawful because, one, it violated my sincerely held religious beliefs, and two, I had already submitted a religious accommodation for it, and that was unlawfully ignored. In February of 2025, my lawyer, David Younts, and I submitted the rebuttal to that board. The board was filled with a lot of hearsay and false testimony. And while that was in adjudication and they were reviewing the case, a mid-level general took away my pay with only 2.5 business days notice and said, out-process the Air Force. We're stopping your pay. You are now on involuntary excess leave. That came at the worst time for my family. My wife had recently lost her work contract, so we had no income. And we had just had 2 home repairs, 2 car repairs, and we were looking at the fact that our savings had just been exhausted. We didn't know what we were going to do. We were about to have to sell out our house. My wife got the idea, hey, maybe we can ask for support, and an article by J.M. Phelps at the Gateway Pundit. Thanks again, Phelps. You are, thanks for throwing it on the screen. That's the more recent one. There was one from June of 2025, but that article is essentially what kickstarted this process to bring me where I am today. And his article told everyone, the entire nation, about my plight, what we'd been through. And that article eventually got to the Secretary of the Air Force. The Secretary of the Air Force intervened about 3 months after my pay was cut and said, this is wrong. We don't treat our members like this. Turn his pay back on. However, I was still not allowed to fly. Backing up a little bit, since the start of COVID, I have not been allowed to fly. So I am now 5.5 years out of the cockpit. However, that article then was sent to the Inspector General of the Air Force and the Air Force Review Board's agency director, who handles equal opportunity complaints. And both of those agencies did an independent review, again, based on that article. It was in the top line of their statements, and said, we have found, after independent investigation, that you were wronged, the Air Force violated law and policy, and we substantiate your complaints against your original letter of reprimand, which is what sent me to the discharge board in the first place. Davis and I took those 2 pieces of substantiation of my complaint to the Air Force Board for Correction of Military Records and submitted a appeal for relief. Normally that process takes 6 to 9 months and sometimes many more, but they got it done in about 3 months. And the Secretary of the Air Force, just on 18 March, a few weeks ago, ruled that they were going to fully reinstate me back to active duty, reinstate me back on flying status with full back pay, retroactive to the date that my pay was taken away, and also remove all negative information from my record. This is a huge win for my case and cases of all the similarly situated service members across the force. We actually made that announcement, unbeknownst to me, on the exact day, 19 March 2026, the 1-year anniversary of when I was notified my pay was being taken away. So it is a huge serendipitous turn of events. And I thank God and Davis and Phelps for all their amazing work and everything that Children's Health Defense does.
Oh, it's just a wonderful story in the end. But Davis, tell us from your point of view, because as wonderful as it says, I feel so bad for all those other people out there that have not got this happy ending.
Right, and so we're still in a real fight on several different fronts. What COVID really revealed to us, and I think your listeners, the people watching this, will appreciate this. The military has had a long accepted both medical exemption process and a religious accommodation process for military members. You don't give up your constitutional rights when you join the military. You have religious freedom. And the default position of the military, based on the Constitution, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, policy and regulation, is if there is a way for the military to accommodate a religious belief, we do it. That's baked into who we are as Americans. That's baked into our military system. COVID was different. As we watched the COVID process, and anthrax was different. And that's an older example, but we didn't learn anything from anthrax. In part, you would expect what we learned from anthrax and the fact that the anthrax vaccine, when it was rolled out for the military, was ruled unlawful and illegal. We essentially did the same thing during COVID. But I say all that to say what COVID revealed is that when evil men like the former Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, and others, for whatever reason, whatever motivation is behind it, decide there will be compliance no matter what, they instituted a program that ignored the Constitution, ignored the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and it broke the religious accommodation review process. So now in a post-COVID world, when all of us would love to be able to take a deep breath and say, okay, we've moved past that, there hasn't been real accountability inside the Pentagon. And what you're seeing is the religious accommodation review process, particularly in the Air Force. The Air Force is the worst at this right now, but they are ignoring the law still. They're not following the law on the religious accommodation review process. And so that's the real story that needs to be out there. That's why the movie that Children's Health Defense is doing, Duty to Disobey, is so important. We need people to understand this fight, to understand what's happening, because all we really need to do is the military to follow the religious accommodation review process, and it's going to solve a lot of these problems. And we can have policy debates about the efficacy of these vaccines, how dangerous they are for military members. I mean, the flu vaccine, it is absurd that the military would say that healthy service members have to get a vaccine that has been demonstrated to have negative efficacy. Set aside the side effects, set aside the fact that it makes people sick and otherwise, just the reality that it is not effective, and yet it's still being mandated. And we're not seeing religious accommodations to the vaccine, just like the issues we saw with COVID. So again, there's lessons to be learned from Skip's case. The most important lesson is this, that the religious accommodation review process in the military is broken, and the military needs to get serious about actually following that process and understanding that military members are not going to want to serve. We're not going to get good people in the military to continue to serve if their constitutional rights are going to be trampled, even though they're taking an oath to support and defend the Constitution and do that. And the military is a microcosm of society. So even if you're not in the military, even if you don't have someone that's close to you that's serving, you have to understand they roll these things out with the military first, just like they did with anthrax, to test compliance. And it becomes, in many respects, a social experiment. And there's a dark history of that we should not ignore when we analyze these things. And that has to change. But we have to get back to recognizing the law, recognizing the Constitution, and understanding that we all have God-given rights. The government can't take them away. And we don't want service members to have those rights trampled.
No, and one of the things that we found out, well, speaking to military people just recently, they were saying that since COVID, they've really started diving into all of the vaccines, and they don't want any of them now that they understand. And, to our viewers, you listening right now, we have a choice. We, the public, have a choice. It's a horrible, we have to fight, and our kids may not be able to go to school, but we have a choice. You guys in the military who defend and look after us have no choice.
Well, and the thing is, it doesn't have to be that way. And that's the reality. There are some, and I've had meetings at the Pentagon, there are some that are afraid if they grant too many exemptions or they look at vaccination policy, somehow they're going to lose the authority to mandate these vaccines. But the reality is when we signed up for the military, when I signed up, when Skip signed up, we didn't sign up to waive our constitutional rights or our religious freedom or our rights as humans. And so the military can accomplish this, but they're unwilling, and they've really been indoctrinated by modern medicine. They've really been indoctrinated by the pharmaceutical industry to think that these vaccines are necessary when they really, really are not, and they should be evaluated on an individual case-by-case basis. So again, it's just like what Secretary Kennedy is doing and trying to bring about changes. We need the same thing done in the military because there's a lot of myths, there's a lot of misunderstanding, and people really have, joined this cult of vaccination, thinking it is some sort of a miracle to prevent these injuries when it's actually killing people.
And sorry, carry on, Skip. Carry on.
I was going to say, for example, in 2023, when I brought my antibodies results to my commander and I said, sir, here's my results. I have a very robust immune system and I should be given an exemption for this year's shot. And he looked at me and said, can you guarantee that the version of the flu you got is the same one in the shot? And I said, excuse me, sir, are you saying that a product that was developed 6 to 9 months ago and was a guess at the strain that is currently circulating is somehow better than the strain I just got that was currently circulating in the population? He blinked and repeated, can you guarantee or have a way to prove that what you got was the one circulating in the current population? I said, sir, I just had it 2 weeks ago. It is currently circulating in the population. What do you want me to do? This is not logically sound. This is not scientifically sound. He goes, well, I'm not a doctor. I said, exactly, sir. You're a commander. You're supposed to weigh information as it comes to you and then make a decision. And still, he proceeded to punish me.
Yeah, and just on that note, the level of abuse that you and your colleagues got was something that our film crew were absolutely astounded by. I mean, it was disgusting.
Yeah. Some of my friends were in solitary confinement for not getting the shot. And there's a image of Lance Castle right now on the screen. The reason I've spoken to Lance about that incident, and he was concerned, and the reason why he resisted is he thought he was going to be forcibly injected with the COVID shot against his will. That's not what happened there. They actually gave him a sedative, just so your viewers are aware. Lance Castle was not forcibly injected with the COVID shot against his will. But that's the controversy around that situation. He's still in his fight right now, trying to get restitution.
So,
go ahead.
I was going to say, what's next for you now? Because you're not going to be taking all these shots, are you? Reinstated. I mean, what's the deal?
So we're
not going to let you take the shots.
Right. Thank you for that. In the documentation from the Board for Correction and Military Records, they said, while I'm currently on a 90-day administrative exemption for the flu shot, I still have to apply for another religious accommodation if I am going to continue this fight. So that is my next step. I'm sad that they didn't make that decision during the board, but that's where things stand at the moment. I have 2.5 years till I can retire. I'll be at 18 years of honorable service here in a few months, but I'm not giving up. And if it weren't for people like the friends and family around me, and especially my wife, who's been with me every single way, the entire way. She was the one who initially said, honey, we can't do this. I was about 2 weeks from getting the COVID shot the first time around. And because we were concerned we were going to be without a job, that we were going to get a dishonorable discharge. And so I was trying to protect my family at a cost to myself. And finally, she came around after a lot of prayer and fasting and doing some further study on it. And she walked up to me one day and said, there's no way. I can't let you. Do not do this. I said, okay, that's all I needed, hon.
We need to get her on the next show. I want to speak to her.
She's awesome.
All right. So Davis and Skip, some last words for really the military people watching now, because I know personally people who love being in the military, but they can't wait to get out. They're counting down the days because they don't want to take another flu shot or a barrage of vaccines or drugs.
So one of the things I will say is follow the law, follow the process.
Yes.
Do not give up. If they ask you to submit a religious accommodation request, submit it. Follow the process they tell you to follow. And just like Skip and I did in his case, eventually the right people saw they messed up. They did it wrong. They didn't properly process his religious accommodation review. And so if we have clean hands when we fight these cases, it sets up things well, just like in the Doster case. So from an attorney's perspective, you can stand by your rights. You don't have to comply, but make sure you're following the process well. Make sure you're getting good guidance. Don't give them an excuse. There are plenty of people out there, plenty of great military members, some that I admire, that were provoked into making mistakes, losing their temper, or some other stupid thing occurred that the military uses as an excuse. Don't fall for that. Be above and beyond reproach. Stand strong. And do things like talk to your congressmen and senators, share the trailer to Duty to Disobey. We need attention on it. We need Congress to understand what's happening to our military folks. And it's not just about the future. It's about accountability for what's happened.
Absolutely. Skip, any last words?
I think the largest travesty in the military currently is that we are not trained on the Constitution. I think going through officer training back in 2023 through 2026, we had one class on the Constitution, and then as officers or senior enlisted, we don't see the Constitution again until we're like 13 to 14 years in service. We need annual training on the Constitution, and we need to understand and nearly memorize the very thing that we are swearing an oath to, because we don't give up those rights when we join the military. It is our duty to defend them, not just for ourselves, but for our entire nation.
Well, will you both keep us updated on what's going on and come back on? And what I just want to finish by saying this. And by the way, viewers, in any second now, we're going to show you a clip, not of just the trailer, but we're also going to show you how you become a host for Duty to Disobey, because I think they're not going to like this movie. But one of the things I loved about you guys and all of the people that we interviewed is your faith. Your faith was so strong. I don't think I've ever been in an environment with such strong faith. So it's Easter weekend this weekend. So any last words on faith for our people?
Go, Davis.
Oh, I just want to say that none of this, my own stand against the vaccine, none of what Skip would have done and so many others would have been possible without our faith in Christ as our Lord and Savior. And I will tell you, for many of us, this became a gospel issue. I can't tell you how many times during this whole process, senior leaders, politicians, media figures would ask me, why are you doing this? And the simple answer was, this is my faith. This is what God's word tells us to do. This is the stand. So I am incredibly grateful for men like Skip and so many others whose faith has impacted me, and it's grown in our faith. And I would just say, for anyone out there that is seeking, read your Bibles, turn to Christ, and that will be the most important thing you can do during this Easter season.
Amen to that. Well, thank you, both of you. It's so lovely to see you both again.
Absolutely.
And congratulations for just fighting, standing firm and not settling. So very, very proud of you. But we do want to get you back on again soon. So just keep us updated.
We will. It's my pleasure and honor.
God bless.
God bless you so much. Thanks.
All right, everyone. So now we're going to show you how to become a host. So please do become hosts, because you know they're going to try and ban this film everywhere. So, but we are the people, and we will make this happen. And then we're going to go to doctors and scientists. So stay tuned for that.
Want to bring a screening of Duty to Disobey to your community? It's simple to become a host. First, go to dutytodisobeyfilm.com. There you can watch the trailer, learn more about the film, and when you're ready, click the Be a Host button. Once you sign up, you'll be contacted by Bella, and she'll send you a host kit with everything you need and the next steps. The main thing we'll ask you to do is help us identify a potential local venue. This can be as simple as doing a quick Google search, or maybe you already have a place in mind. We're primarily looking for places like independent theaters, chiropractic offices, town halls, event centers, or other community gathering spaces. You'll just reach out to the venue to check availability, seating capacity, cost, and whether DVDs can be sold at the event. Once you've got that information, send it over to us and we'll take it from there. We'll work with the venue to secure the location, set up a ticketing page for your event, and handle the rest of the details and logistics. All you have to do is share the ticket link with your community, promote the event, and show up on the day of the screening to check in your guests. And here's something new this time. You can get paid for hosting. At your screening, you'll be able to sell DVDs of the film and earn $5 for every DVD sold. So if you want to bring Duty to Disobey to your community, head over to dutytodisobeyfilm.com. Click Be a Host, and we'll get you started. We can't wait to work with you.
Ph.D. Welcome. It's Doctors and Scientists. Happy Friday. I love doing this show. And the reason that I love doing this show is because I'm a parent. And, I know the title is Doctors and Scientists, but I think that anybody that, regardless of having alphabet soup behind their name, really much, much more important than anything that we do during the day with like pedigrees and diploma certificates and licenses and registrations on the walls, which I haven't put up yet. Being a parent is so much more important. It is like the most important thing that you can do for your child. I think that, to me, my relationship with God is first, my relationship with my wife is second, and then, very, very close behind that is my relationship with my son. Then work and other, the extraneous things, advocacy, whatever, they're somewhere down below that. And I think that we need to emphasize that more. And the person that comes to mind automatically on the front lines working with parents is a wonderful man, Len Arcuri. Len, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian. Great to be
You
here.
do so much to empower parents. And in all-in parent coaching, you focused and your beginning focus was autism, developmental disabilities. You have an autistic son yourself, but I think all in parenting is really much more than that. Is that correct?
Absolutely, it's correct. It means that as parents, we can show up even more powerfully to make great decisions. People like you and me, when we receive that diagnosis, we're not equipped really to be parents, let alone parents of a child with complex challenges. So the all in is about how parents have so much more capability and capacity than we may give ourselves credit for, but we need to kick to the curb what's in our way.
When that diagnosis happens, that was the most helpless moment of my life. It absolutely, completely. I do not know anything about this whatsoever. My son was diagnosed by a pediatrician at 18 months of age. But you talk about empowering parents, and I think the sort of the ersatz title of this particular interview is "The Parent is the Force Multiplier," and I want to get that out in front because what you do to empower parents is so amazing and is so important. So just, if you want to start conceptually or wherever you want to start with this, in terms of parents that are tackling, specifically an autism diagnosis or related neurodevelopmental disorder diagnosis, let's talk about the parent's role.
Absolutely. And I appreciate that you sharing that. And yes, I think the only tweak I would say to what you indicated is that I really don't empower parents because the parents have the innate power. They don't need me to give it to them. So it's really much more, the way I like to phrase it is it's about parents tapping the capacity that they already have. But I say this with all humility because I know I absolutely wasn't equipped to navigate this journey well. I've had so many dynamite influences who have helped me learn over the course of, now 15, 16 years. But the reality is I wish I knew certain things earlier. And that is where this concept of a parent basically raising their hand and stepping into that version of themselves that they want to become and that their child needs or wants them to become right now to make great decisions, that's available for any of us if we have the awareness of what's in our way. And that's where parents, there's so much that you can do. There's a lot in life that we can't control, but how we show up, how we respond, we absolutely can make changes in terms of how we're making decisions. It really comes down to leadership, that I know sounds like kind of a businessy term, but we are the leaders of this journey. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity for us to step up and again, bring our best selves to make great decisions. And even though there's lots of people out there who are coaches and who, can give advice to parents, and there's a place for that, I've really discerned that parents don't need more advice from another parent about what to do, but how they're navigating, how they're making decisions. Nobody teaches that. And that's the lane that, I really feel like is needed for parents to get better equipped with how they're making decisions, how they're being a leader for their child. And that's why I provide, and the podcast that I have is meant to share those insights for parents to tap the capability and the capacity that they already have.
Having been a part of your program and being able to work with you, I see that part of the journey is just to provide clarity, in terms of like, what I specifically want, what my wife and I want, and then, being able to sort of legitimately categorize and prioritize and gave sort of a different frame of thinking. And I really appreciate that. But I want to talk about the obvious. You said it before we got on camera. It's my show. I can do whatever I want. So I'm co-opting the show today. Let's talk about dads. The first conference that I went to regarding autism was a DAN conference, Defeat Autism Now. I believe it was 2001 and 2002. Or 2002, I can't remember exactly, but my son had been diagnosed since 1999. I have twin autistic nieces that were diagnosed then, I think in 2000. And so I took my brother-in-law, their dad, with me. Len, it was a sea of moms, and there were like three other dudes. I mean, and it's, there are things that are tougher. I don't want to make any type of generalizations, but there are things that I think are tougher for dudes. And I don't want to see anybody be sidelined from this journey, because I think that it takes both parents. I think that both parents are integral and important. And in your experience, why do dudes sideline themselves so much? And I'm not saying that the guys that weren't there were deadbeat dads. A lot of them, maybe that they were at work, dad's work, mom's work, maybe that was just the designated parent. So I'm not automatically assuming that the dads for all those autism moms were deadbeat dads. But I think that in some ways it can be sidelining for dads.
No doubt. And I was at my own Defeat Autism Now conference a little bit further down the road than yours. Mine was in 2009. And yeah, they gave me a standing ovation because I happened to be a dude who was showing up in a sea of moms. And again, I was only there because my wife, Cass, basically she took care of things at home and wanted me to go there. Otherwise, I would have been I wasn't excited about going to a quote unquote autism conference. But in answer to your question, I mean, what I've discerned and what I've learned is that it simply comes down to the beliefs and the stories that both parents are telling themselves, especially early on. So dads aren't necessarily intentionally sidelining themselves. They want to be helpful. They want to be useful. But based on their beliefs at the time, it's easy to get stuck and it's easy to pretend that there's no problem, right? Therefore, no need to do any kind of expensive therapies or to take action or to do something unless the doctor recommends it. It's hard to step into that problem solving mode and taking action. It's easier to stay where you are. So I feel like every parent's doing the best they can based on their beliefs at the time. So the power move for any parent early on is to become aware of what stories they may be telling themselves in order to shift. And if they do that, I think dads will be much less likely to sideline themselves or to isolate. And it gives a more of an opportunity for the parents who bring wildly different energies. The masculine and the feminine energies are so wildly different, but there's a way, there is absolutely a way for parents to get better aligned, to divide and conquer, and to basically get on the same page with helping their child with, the the challenges that that child may be exhibiting. Early on, it becomes too easy for parents, instead of aligning for the child, to get into a competitive mode,
Right.
and that's where that competition doesn't help the child. And sometimes it's hard for parents to bridge the gap, and to get on the same page if it's just them doing the talking. So sometimes a third party, somebody objectively who can help them see what they can't see, can be very powerful.
The diagnosis and even living the life can be very isolating. And so you said something really, really important. I mean, getting a third party in there, somebody that can look from more of an objective perspective. And there are so many things emotionally, I think that, looking back, I was remembering, that I was going through my process, my wife was going through in her process, and I don't want this to sound like a big head trip, because you know what, it wasn't about us; it was about my son. Uh, you know, as difficult as it was for us, it was more difficult for him. But still, at the time, I mean, there were things that were going through my mind and my heart that held us back, that absolutely held us back. I was ready for my protege to join alongside me in the lab on the computer. I grew up in a culture, in graduate school and then postdocing and things like that, where father and son, father and daughter, mother and son, mother and daughter were working in the lab bench right away. And there was this mentoring and things like that. And as, it became more and more evident that the trajectory was going to be different, that was really, really difficult.
Yeah, no, I think what you just shared is important. And again, it comes down to these stories, these beliefs we're telling ourselves that we're certain are true, but that ultimately might produce a lot of friction. And we could spend a
Hmm.
long time talking about what those stories might be. But it's that's our programming. Our
Right.
programming is our mindset and our belief structure, and none of us are really aware of them. And there's a few kind of key beliefs that tend to fuel a lot of the friction.
Hmm.
So that's where there's some key beliefs that we all hold to some degree, that if we can become aware of it and shift, which doesn't have to take a long time, everything can shift radically in terms of just how a parent's showing up. And again, going to the dad who sidelines himself, if he, just a little bit of awareness early on can help that dad step into a more proactive role, leveraging his
Hmm.
superpowers and being part of the solution. But so often the let's say the mom's ideas of what to do versus the dad's ideas of what to do are wildly different. And that's
Right.
why, again, it turns into kind of a competition. So I like to bottom line it by just saying, for each parent, mom and dad, the key question is, do you want to win? In other words, have what you're advocating for win the day? Do you want to win? Do you really want to commit to getting what you want? And what most parents want for their child is for them to thrive, for answers to be found that meets their needs and helps
Hmm.
them thrive as much as possible. Parents will align for what's best for the child after they drop the competitiveness and judging the other person's views or ideas, as off base, or so again, it's that competitive nature that tends to show up,
Right.
with parents with the best of intent. They want to help their child, but they're approaching it with such different energies and ideas. You have to kind of declare the truce, and then
Hmm.
both get on the same side of the table looking at what's happening. And when parents can do that, yeah, what was kind of tense becomes much more of a collaborative partnership. And the other key thing is parents, not every single decision about your child needs to be a co-decision, a joint decision.
Right.
So parents learning how to divide and conquer what they're each good at is another powerful move.
What you've just said is so important, because it is coming together. Part of the coming together is being able to, more accurately assess the situation, because it's easy. I don't know if it's a guy thing or whatever, but even, as my son was regressing, it was almost easier to minimize at the time, emotionally, because I knew that when you dip your toe into, wow, there really is a problem here, then action is required. And so something has to break. So I was the minimizer. My wife was more, she was concerned regarding his development, because he had development trajectory issues almost from the start. So we sort of bloomed in that area at different points in time. And I see that with a lot of parents. I see that with a lot of parents. So getting on the same page in terms of assessing that exact situation. Let's clarify this, and I'll have you weigh in. I mean, you're not a therapist. You're not a counselor. There's a role for that, absolutely. And I would recommend that. I mean, I use that to process my emotions and to get clear on my emotions around, especially around that particular time. But what you do is different, and may actually be in harmony with, somebody that isn't a counseling profession. If you could describe more what you're doing, and the uniqueness of that type of coaching.
Sure, sure. Yeah, no, I describe myself not as a coach as much as a more of a more private strategic advisor for a parent.
Hmm.
And the reason I
Hmm.
use that language is coaching kind of indicates more like advice giving. And again, I'm glad you teed this up, because the last thing I do is pretend to be a therapist, a marital therapist.
Right.
I mean, there is a role for that. There is a need for that. I just find that often what has parents at odds is just a lack of alignment on what they're going for. That's why I mentioned what I did before. Like what's your want right now? And parents generally are aligned on really wanting the best for the child. And so there's ways of helping parents to get aligned. And again, it's something they can't do usually just talking with each other. You need
Right.
somebody else there who can, again, just sometimes we can't hear certain information from our spouse. We're kind of just not receptive. So sometimes it's just an independent person that can help parents really align in a powerful way. And if there's a need for counseling, again, that's a specialty that I don't pretend to have, just
Right.
like I don't pretend to be a medical doctor. I know a lot. I watch your show. I do my own research. I know a lot as a parent, but I don't pretend that I know more than like a MAPS practitioner or a medical practitioner. So really, again, where I come into play is helping the parent as the CEO and the chief decision maker. My goal is to help them retain that decision making, because there's a lot of forces that are trying to take it away from parents. And that means figuring out who's on their team, who's reporting to them. And that means a good medical practitioner, right? That also could mean perhaps if for that couple, marital therapist or counseling. So again, the key is forming the right team, and I help parents figure out who those right team members are based on what they're looking for, kind of extracting it out of their head as opposed to who I think they should be going to see. So
Hmm.
again, forming that team of the right advisors. And again, where I fit in is about how they're navigating, how they're leading the journey. And it starts, there's basically 5 phases with leadership. And I'll just throw them out at you quickly, because each of
Great.
these 5 phases is really important. And we as parents can get stuck in any one of these phases. So, just high level, it starts with heightened awareness, right? Really understanding what's going on with your child, understanding more than just the diagnosis. And as you experienced with the program, it's awareness about the parent themselves and how they're navigating, where their superpowers are, where their opportunities are to improve. So just like an ATEC score gives you a quantified, measurable assessment of the child, the assessment I created is really an assessment of the parent and what's their power level. So that first step, heightened awareness, is really key. And then the next four steps, really quickly, after heightened awareness, it goes to critical thinking, right? Which is the step that we hear all about at CHD. RFK Jr. talked about it all the time.
Right.
Not all of us really have the skills to think critically, and we don't do it well. It's an easy concept to understand, but basically that critical thinking is absolutely an essential step in making better decisions, not just doing what you're told. And then that moves to the third step, which is what I call dynamic decision making. Sometimes we can get stuck in making all the decisions. What therapy or what doctor or what school, what therapist specifically should work with my child. These are all decisions that it's easy to get stuck. And so being able to make decisions, not stay in indecision and overthinking, is another powerful step and an area where we can easily get stuck. So that's the third step. And then the fourth one is basically about consistent action taking. It's easy for us to make decisions and then fall down in the execution, the implementation. Sometimes we give up, too quickly. We don't have the patience and the persistence to allow some of our decisions to take hold and to benefit our child. And sometimes you need accountability with somebody else for you to do, take these actions that are required, that you as a parent decide are required for your child. And as you know, Brian, none of those actions are comfortable. We'd rather be doing something else. So I think that consistent action taking is another key area where we could all use, more personalized support with bringing our best self forward. And then the final step is just really what I would call rapid course correction. And that means even if you have a plan and you're executing it, you have therapists, you have interventions perhaps, you don't just set it and forget it. You have to reassess because your child's changing, the situation's changing, your knowledge is changing. So to be able to course correct consistently is another art that a lot of us just aren't really great at doing.
Having gone through this process with you and being in the assessment mode is really continuous. I mean, we're always being continuous observers of what's going on with a particular therapy, a particular intervention, and I really appreciate that because the thing that your coaching has done, you're not telling me what to do, and I've really appreciated that because where every family is different in terms of what intervention that they're going to want with that. And you and I have no doubt. I mean, I don't know if you can comment on this right now, but it seems like the landscape is just dotted with options to the point that it's confusing what to do, when you get this diagnosis. And have you seen that recently? It's difficult. I don't want to editorialize too much, but some of them pop up almost as like cottage industries. But yeah, I mean, what is your thinking, especially regarding kind of the landscape of options right now if you have a son or a daughter with special needs?
Yeah, you're right. Like compared to when you and I were early navigating, there's so many more options, so many more people who are offering to help. And I'd like to believe that it's all well intentioned. But, again, the bottleneck I found isn't more knowledge or advice. It's the decision quality and the execution of the parent. And that's where I feel like there's so many forces that are working for parents to defer to some expert, whether it's a medical practitioner or some guru or influencer, or even, for me, in terms of the kind of guidance I give, the last thing I want is for some parent to defer to my judgment. I want them to step into that version of themselves where they can confidently trust that they're the ones who make the decision, and they want that decision making capability. And again, there's a lot of things that have existed, where people want you to defer to experts, as we know, and what Ph.D. talks about all the time. So I think the key thing is parents not deferring to any expert, but to retain that decision making responsibility and authority. And right now, the big concern going forward is that instead of parents perhaps kind of surrendering their power to some expert and just doing what they're told, now it's easy, it's a very slippery slope of parents deferring the decision making to a chatbot, and because it seems like
Right.
that's a better option. And again, that's even worse than surrendering your decision making to some practitioner or advisor. So again, the key is for the parent to retain that decision making authority, not just because that sounds good, but because nobody on the planet knows your child better than you do. So the power move is just to go from where you are, which may not be overwhelmed and confused. Some parents are, especially early on, and you can go from there to stable and clear with momentum. And for even strong parents who are listening, or practitioners, or and scientists, really capable individuals, there's absolutely another level to get into an even stronger position
Right.
where you're making clearer decisions that are more of a fit for your child, and you're saying no to a lot of options that aren't a fit right now. So you can cut through the overwhelm. And as I think you and we talked about many times, I feel like the bottom line opportunity for any parent is to, number one, have a strategy.
Right.
And most parents don't have a strategy. They're just doing things and seeing how it goes and moving on. So the key is to have a strategy. The power move is to have a strategy that is root cause focused. And that doesn't mean focusing on 20 root causes. It means being able to discern right now what are the top one, two, or three max root causes that if I channel my time, energy, and money on those few root causes and have a really good game plan to address those root causes well, that's how you stack the deck for faster progress and just more connection with your child.
It's so wise. Parents are the best experts in their own children. They are. And, everything that you say really drives that home and resonates and empowers parents. I mean, trust me, by the time your child is old enough to have a diagnosis, you have a PhD in that child. You have a PhD. I'm not saying that you're the experts in children. It's not like, all of a sudden you become, Dr. Mendelsohn or whomever that, that is going to tell you everything about children. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you are the expert. I have a PhD in Stephen Hooker, my son. And so empowering that and then being able to make choices from that particular platform is so different than deferring to an expert or trust the experts on that. Now, I don't think you're precluding other people's expertise when you talk about that, but you're putting the parent in a position of a driver's seat.
Yeah, the parent has to have extreme ownership, as Jocko Willing always talks about,
Right.
extreme ownership. And yes, surround yourself with phenomenal advisors, but they're only advisors. And again, I didn't understand that early on. I thought, okay, whatever this doctor that we're seeing, whatever they do, they clearly know more than I do, and I'm going to do what I'm told. And I'm not going to go on the internet and search and question. So I was much more in a compliant mindset early on. And
Mhm.
so I think the key is understanding that who you surround yourself, who's on your team, who reports to you. Take the time to hire the right people. And that's another big mistake I know I made and many parents make. If you can get clearer on what you're looking for in a practitioner, let's say, who's a fit, who's not a fit,
Right.
if you could just spend a little time getting clarity, then the odds of you starting with someone who's not a fit go way down. Like you'll have a much higher chance of success of hiring the right person. So take the time to hire the right people on your team, and it is your team, and then fire quickly the ones who are not a fit. And so for us, that was very true with respect to therapists, the
Right.
people who were directly working with my son. And again, I was more in deferring mode, like, okay, they're the expert, they know what they're doing. But no, as a parent, you can determine who's a fit, who's not a fit, and again, be very discerning on who gets to work with your child. And regardless of the pedigree, what title they have, how many years, if someone's not a fit, they're not a fit. So the concept I want to just put out there is, imagine it's an organization chart. You're at the top, and all those boxes of who is advising you, they're all important, and you have much more latitude to make sure you got the right people on the right people on the team, and you want people on the team who will collaborate and not just be dictators saying it's my way or the highway. So again, forming that collaborative team takes some effort, but it's absolutely a key move.
I'm making an appeal to dads. Not that I'm not making an appeal to moms, but I'm making an appeal to dads to get involved, to get in this framework and get into this mindset. Len, how can listeners, how can other individuals, how can parents, relatives, practitioners, whomever, how can they get in touch with you?
The best way, honestly, I do have the podcast, which is Autism Parenting Secrets. So just as a resource, it's a powerful resource. I'm changing the name because it doesn't have anything to do with autism. It'll be the All In Parent podcast. So that's just a place for really useful information with dynamite guests that I've had, including you many times, Brian. But in terms of people reaching out to me, the best way, they could just reach out to me directly. I'm len@allinparent.com. And again, I do work with a small number of families in a very deep way, but I'm always available to provide a call for parents. That call in and of itself, I call it a strategic clarity call. In and of itself, that will be useful for you in terms of seeing more clearly what might be in your way and getting you on a better path with more momentum. So if people want to rise into the parent their child needs now and are humble enough to work on themselves, which not everyone is, they could just reach out directly to me, and we could have a quick call that could be very impactful for them.
Well, Len, thank you again. It's always so wonderful to have you back on the show. I learned so much. I've learned so much from you personally. And I wish you all of the best in terms of the journey with your own son and the journey as you're helping parents and other families.
I appreciate that. And again, thank you for everything you're doing, Brian, because again, you are a powerful voice sharing what might be hard to share. But again, like I am, trying to have our lessons learned be something that other parents can benefit from.
Absolutely. And thank you, everybody, for joining us for this important episode of Doctors and Scientists. Share. Get this out. If you can share it on social media, we're going to clip it. We're going to put it on social media. Please make sure that people see this important episode, and have a great Friday.
All right, this is about Johnson & Johnson vaccine. First of all, talk a bit about your background, what you did, obviously not who you worked for, but the type of environment you were in.
Yes, so for almost 20 years, I've worked in pharmaceuticals. So I've sold everything from diabetes, cardiovascular, GI, and then most recently, veterinary medicine, including vaccines.
Right, so I don't think you told everyone your name. Sorry, what's your name?
I'm sorry, my name is Trina Patterson.
Okay. Now, why did you take a COVID shot in the first place?
I did not want to take it. I remember when they first were talking about the warp speed of the vaccine, and this is even when Trump was president. I was like, I'm not taking it. I know how long it takes to make a safe and effective vaccine drug to market, and you can't do it in a couple of weeks. So I did not want to take it. My company initially said that they were not going to make us take it. They thought it would be up to our own individual choice. I previously had COVID in December of 2020 before the vaccine came out. It was extremely mild. I never lost sense of taste, never had a headache, never had a cough. The only thing I had was a fever for 2 days. And after that, I was perfectly normal. I had my antibodies checked a couple of times, and my antibody levels were still extremely high. I went to, in September of 21, my company sent out an email wanting to know everyone's vaccination status. And I was like, okay, here we go. And a couple of weeks later, they announced that we were going to have, if we wanted to keep our employment, we had to have vaccinated either, 2 Pfizer, 2 Moderna, or the 1 J&J. I decided, you know what, I'm not getting it, I don't want it, they're just going to have to fire me. But I've had worked, my entire life in this industry, and I was very, very successful in it. So at the 11th hour, they had given us to November 8th to get the vaccine. I waited until November 8th. I got it at 1 o'clock. Johnson & Johnson, which is not messenger RNA. It is the adenovirus that no one seems to talk about. I know 6% of Americans got that shot, and it's just like, since they took it off the market, we're forgotten about, but there's still a lot of vaccine injured today that have lost their livelihoods, their homes, their lives from the J&J shot, and unfortunately I'm one of them.
Tell us what happened after you took it.
So I took it at a pharmacy. I had a friend videotape a statement prior to, just in case something had happened, because I was worried. And I was also worried, especially at that point, they had just started talking about the pericarditis and the myocarditis. So I went and got the shot. And an hour later, I had a slight headache. But the pharmacist said, oh, you might have a headache. But even Tylenol says you could have a headache. So I was like, okay. I bought some Advil while I was in the pharmacy, and went to go eat lunch. And the headache got a little bit worse. The next day, it got a little bit worse. Day 5, I got out of bed. It was that debilitating. I'd never had a migraine. It felt, I don't know what an aneurysm feels like, but it felt like a bomb was exploding in my head. I couldn't think, I couldn't concentrate. On a scale of 1 to 10, it was 20. The most pain I've ever felt in my life. So I went to see my internal medicine doctor, and he said, yes, it's probably from the vaccine. This happens, it should go away within a week. So he gave me a shot of Toradol. He gave me a migraine medication, and it was either that visit or the following week where he started me on prednisone. So after that, again, this is November 13th, I went back. He started me on high doses of a lower dose on prednisone. Luckily, with me working in the industry, I had friends that worked in all throughout pharma. So a friend that worked in with a neurologist made a call, and I was able to get in and see a neurologist in February, like February 2nd of 2022. They did an MRI with and without contrast, and that showed that I had vasculitis and encephalitis of the brain, which made sense, hence why the migraine medicines weren't working. So it was inflammation. So I started high doses of prednisone. I don't know if you've ever been on prednisone, but it's a good drug, but it's a really bad drug. It causes a lot of weight gain. It makes you really fluffy, and irritability, I was going 3 to 4 days without sleep. That's one of the side effects. And at the time, when I got the MRI results back from the neurologist, he told me that I was 48. If he did not realize my age, just looking at my brain looked as though I was between 80 and 83 years of age, because of the white matter. I should not have that at 48. You should see that later in life. But they did think that when the vaccine left my body, that it would revert back. He thought maybe it was this condition called PRES, which it's posterior reversible encephalopathy syndrome, and that a lot of cancer drugs crosses the blood-brain barrier. So 30 days went by, still not any better. 60 days went by. At this point, I'm on short-term disability from work. And I contacted them the first week and told them that, I'm having side effects from the mandated vaccine, and they gave me an extra 10 days off before I actually had to take my short-term leave. June, and then 90 days, and then they were like, for sure in six months it will be gone. It was not. I went back to work, I was trying to work 1 day a week, and I had saved up a lot of sick days, so I basically used sick days all the rest of that year, and I couldn't do it anymore just with the headaches, and my neurologist did not want me to work after 12 because I live in the South and it's 115 degrees. He didn't know if that was causing the headaches to be even worse. My company refused to work with that accommodation, so I just used vacation PTO days till December, and at that point it had just gotten so bad that I couldn't do anything. My memory, and it's not like you hear the people talk about the memory fog. I was forgetting things that I should know, like the alarm to my house, the police came twice. Just little things that I should know off the top of my head. I had no memory of it. Long term was okay. Short term was severely bad. And I did some cognitive testing that also documented that. I'm still currently, I'm seeing 2 neurologists, my internal medicine doctor. I was terminated from my job last summer while I was on unpaid leave, which was probably the most devastating part of all of it, because I took every supplement, all the detox, ivermectin. There's not a supplement that I didn't take to try to get better, to be able to get my life and my career back. The only positive out of all of this is that my faith in God is a lot stronger, because the doctors have tried literally everything from chemo medicines to all sort of autoimmune drugs to try to get the inflammation down. And almost 27 months later, I'm still not any better when you look at my imaging on my brain and my blood work.
I'm glad you're talking about Johnson & Johnson, because we really rarely hear about it.
Very rare.
Have you done a deep dive into the Johnson & Johnson ingredients and what that's all about?
I have, to a certain degree. Can I remember it now? No, but I've only met a few people. I had a colleague that worked with me at the pharmaceutical company that also did not want to take it, and he took it, and on the 5th day he was paralyzed from the shoulders down, and so he's about 28 months, which they terminated his position. A little different than mine, but he's unable to work. He is now able to walk a little bit in a wheelchair. I mean, with a walker, but still utilizes a wheelchair. And
Johnson & Johnson.
And that is Johnson & Johnson as well. And the company holds no responsibility. When they first said that they were going to mandate it, one of the questions when we had back in the day, all the Zoom calls was, if we're injured, are you going to take care of us and stand by us? And they said yes. And I mean, I was a top performer, and when I couldn't work anymore, they literally sent me a FedEx letter telling me that my position would be terminated.
So what are you doing now?
Now I spend my days watching videos like this, hoping to find somebody that has had similar side effects to the vaccine like myself, that has found something that's made them better. As of today, that has not happened.
So with your background with Big Pharma and stuff, what do you think about all vaccinations now?
It has changed my mind a lot. For starters, I had no clue until I started researching it, because I don't have children. And when I looked at the vaccines that children have to take from, in the womb to birth to now, it's astounding that you would give a child these many vaccines. And I just look at myself. I'm 50, and probably way back then, I think my mom was like, you might have had 3 or 4 shots. I didn't have to take a shot to go to or to go to college or any of that. And but I was probably pro-vax then, and now with the experience that I've personally have, and reading all these stories about these poor children, I mean, my heart just goes out, and I can just pray that one day that this will reverse, the fluid will leave my heart, all the other cognitive issues that I have will recorrect, but I don't know if I can ever work for a pharmaceutical company again.
No.
And that's been my life.
Is there anything else you want to add to the story?
Just, it's 2020. It breaks my heart when I go to pick up a prescription, people stand in line to get these shots. And the media is censoring us any way that they can. I mean, you should be on. Our lives have been injured. The media did an amazing job to get the vaccine. They truly did. I have family members that I begged them, and this was before I was forced to take it, that I begged them not to get it. But the media did such a great job at scaring them into thinking that they would die if they didn't get it. And I'm not minimizing people that got really sick. I do think people got really sick from it, but people get sick from a lot of things. People die from the flu. That's just life. But you don't see people like myself that's perfectly healthy, and they get a vaccine and their life is completely changed, or they die suddenly, because that's the scary part. But I think that pharmaceutical companies should be held liable. I've done a lot. I've promoted a lot of drugs. They've never had no liability. We've never had to deal with emergency authorized use. I did not have conformed consent. It was is safe and effective, and it wasn't. It was not tested. They gave it to pregnant women. It wasn't tested. So I think that any company that made a person pick between their livelihood and a forced to market vaccine should be held responsible.
Thank you. Thank you for telling your story.
Thank you.
Yeah, really appreciate it.
This and all CHD TV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. Please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.